They called it a dead route. Then it ran again. The Vethkai Transit Inspector's name was Sorath Veen, and the first thing he said when he stepped off the shuttle into Waypoint Kethra 7 was, "This is the facility." He said it the way a man says it when he already knows the answer and just wants someone nearby to feel bad about it. His 3-person documentation team filed in behind him with their recording rigs, and they all did the same slow pivot, taking in the main interchange floor, the analog signal boards with their amber indicator lights, the manual coupling console, the bare steel of the service deck, the single folding work table with a thermos and a parts tray on it. I was standing next to the thermos. I had been in the middle of a quarterly filter check on the atmosphere scrubbers when their shuttle pinged for docking clearance. I'd given it, finished what I was doing, and walked out to meet them. Veen looked at me for a moment. Then he looked around the floor again, as if he'd missed a second person somewhere. "You're the maintenance contract," he said. "Cobb Varrell," I said. 22 years on station. That got a short sound from one of the documentation team. Not quite a laugh, but the shape of one. Veen pulled out his assessment tablet and started making notes without looking up. "The Galaxy Spur line," he said, "has been rated non-operational for transit authority purposes since Cycle 41. This inspection is a formality preceding formal decommissioning. We'll need access to the collar assembly, the signal relay trunk, and whatever passes for your maintenance records." "Collar assemblies on the external dock ring," I said. "Signal relay trunk is through that door. Records are on the table." I pointed at the table. The records were a set of paper logbooks, bound in order by year, stacked about 30 centimeters high. Veen's documenter picked one up, looked at it, and set it back down with the careful neutrality of someone handling something very old and slightly embarrassing. We walked the facility. Veen narrated into his tablet the whole time, a steady, practiced murmur about infrastructure age and parts obsolescence and the Transit Authority's migration to fully automated coupling systems. His team photographed everything: the manual torque controls, the mechanical signal flags, the analog pressure gauges I'd replaced the seals on 3 weeks prior. One of them spent a long time photographing the parts tray on my work table, which held 2 torque bars, a grease pot, a seal punch, and a calibration gauge. He photographed it the way you photograph a curiosity at a museum. We were on the external dock ring, Veen mid-sentence about projected decommissioning timelines, when the alert tone went off. I knew the tone. I'd heard it maybe 4 times in 22 years, the signal that an unscheduled vessel was holding at approach distance, requesting emergency coupling clearance. I walked back inside to the signal board and read the identifier. Oren Line Courier. Registry out of the Sethkai Drift. Requesting priority docking on account of a navigation system partial failure. They'd lost maneuvering precision and needed a hard dock to stabilize for repairs. "What is that?" Veen said, from behind me. "Courier vessel requesting emergency docking," I said. I was already pulling up the collar assembly status on the board. Oren Line. They need the Galaxy Spur collar. Veen looked at his tablet. The Galaxy Spur collar has been logged as non-operational since. "I know what it's logged as," I said. The status read what I'd half expected it to read. The magnetic collar assembly, the external coupling ring that the courier would need to hard dock, was showing a seized state. Not broken. Seized. The collar had been sitting at full magnetic clench for the better part of 2 days because I'd cycled it through an extended lock test earlier that week and the automatic release hadn't fired cleanly. I'd made a note to look at the release trigger on Friday. It was Thursday. Veen was already talking to someone on his communication rig. I caught the words automated repair deployment and diagnostic sequence. His team's documenter had turned the recording equipment back on and was framing a shot of the seized collar indicator light on my board. A single red amber glow, very photogenic, clearly the image that was going to appear in whatever decommissioning report got filed. 3 of Veen's remote repair drones, compact, expensive-looking units that folded out of a case one of his team members had been carrying, deployed to the external ring. They attached to the collar housing and began running their diagnostic sequence. A small screen on Veen's tablet showed their progress. It had a progress bar. Estimated diagnostic completion, Veen said, reading from the screen, 40 minutes. Repair recommendation to follow. The Oren Line courier was holding at approach distance. Their pilot had been on the comm twice already, polite, professional, and increasingly aware that whatever was going to happen with their docking was going to take a while. I picked up my torque bar and my grease pot from the work table. "What are you doing?" Veen said. "Going to free the collar," I said. There was a pause. Veen looked at the torque bar. He looked at the grease pot. He looked at me. The automated system is running a full diagnostic, he said. We have a protocol. You have a courier holding on emergency clearance, I said. I'll be outside. He said something else. I was already through the door. The collar assembly on the Galaxy spurred dock ring is not a complicated mechanism. It's a magnetic clamping collar with a mechanical override, the kind of hardware that was considered maintenance intensive when the Waypoint was built, which is why the Transit Authority had eventually decided the whole category of equipment wasn't worth the trouble. The magnetic core was seized in the locked position because the release trigger spring had cold cycled one too many times and needed to be compressed manually before it would re-engage correctly. I knew this because I had freed the same collar from the same seized state twice before in 22 years, and both times it had taken about the same thing: a torque bar applied to the manual override housing, a specific angle of pressure to compress the spring, and enough grease on the trigger mechanism that it would seat cleanly when it released. I applied the torque bar. I applied the grease. I worked the override through 2 full compression cycles. On the 3rd cycle, the collar released with a sound like a very large lock opening, which is more or less what it was. I wiped the torque bar on my work rag and walked back inside. Veen's drones were at 11% on their diagnostic progress bar. Collars free, I said. You can give the courier clearance. Veen stared at me. His documenter was still filming. One of the drones, through the external viewport, was still attached to the collar housing, running its scan of a mechanism that was no longer seized. I gave the courier clearance myself, from my board, and watched on the external feed as they moved in and coupled cleanly. The coupling tone rang through the interchange floor, a clean, resonant sound, the kind that means everything seated correctly. I hadn't heard it in about 3 years. It still sounded the same. Veen said nothing for a moment. Then, how long did that take? I thought about it. 7, 8 minutes. I wasn't timing it. He looked at his tablet, where the drone diagnostic was now at 14%. The collar assembly, he said, carefully, is logged as non-operational. The collar assembly is operational, I said. It's seized because I ran an extended lock test earlier this week and the release trigger needs to be looked at. That's on my Friday list. I walked over to the table and picked up the maintenance logbooks. I found the current year's volume and set it in front of him, open to the relevant page. Then I found the previous year's volume and set it next to the first. I did this until I had a row of volumes going back 11 years, each one open to the collar assembly maintenance entry, which appeared every 14 days without exception. It's been serviced on a 2-week cycle since the station was commissioned, I said. Hasn't missed once. Veen looked at the logbooks. He looked at the open pages. He looked at the entry intervals, the same 2-week gap, in the same handwriting, year after year, component inspections and lubrication cycles, and the 2 previous seized collar resolutions noted in the same flat professional shorthand. His documenter had turned the camera toward the logbooks. I wasn't sure if that was still part of the decommissioning record or something else now. Outside, through the viewport, the Oran Line courier sat coupled to the dock ring. A second tone had sounded a few minutes earlier, their navigation team signaling that they were beginning the repair sequence. The Galaxy spur collar was holding the vessel steady, doing what it had been built to do, which it had been technically capable of doing the whole time. Veen made a note on his tablet. A long one. The decommissioning assessment, he said, eventually, will be submitted to the authority as scheduled. All right, I said. It may take some time to process. He didn't look up from the tablet. Given the operational status documentation. I'll be here, I said. That was true in a fairly complete sense. I had been here for 22 years, servicing equipment that the Transit Authority had decided wasn't worth servicing, maintaining a line they had decided wasn't worth maintaining, on a contract that had been renewed every cycle in an automated process that nobody had bothered to review. The Galaxy spur had been logged as dead for most of that time. The courier finished its repairs and undocked 4 hours later. The coupling tone rang clean again as the collar released, properly this time, without intervention, because I had taken 20 minutes that afternoon to reset the trigger spring and add it to the weekly checklist. The Oran Line pilot sent a brief message before they cleared the approach corridor. Professional courtesy, I supposed, a thank you from one person who showed up and did their job to another. Veen and his team left on their shuttle about an hour after the courier cleared. His documenter had spent the final 20 minutes of the visit photographing the logbooks. Not the seized collar indicator. The logbooks. I poured the last of the thermos into my cup, sat down at the work table, and opened the current volume to the next blank entry line. I wrote the date, the collar service note, the trigger spring reset, and the Oren line docking, event, duration, outcome, next scheduled inspection. The amber lights on the signal board ran their slow cycle. The waypoint was quiet. The Galaxy spur line was, technically speaking, open.